He is a featured columnist at GoHeels.com, the official website of Carolina Athletics, and author of many books, including Carolina Basketball, A Century of Excellence. And just a couple of housekeeping items. We will be wrapping the event before 7, and the store closes at 7 p.m. So I encourage you all to continue any conversations you may have after the event at the beautiful root cellar patio outside. But I hope you enjoy, and thank you so much for supporting your local independent bookstore. Thanks.
I think that was a nice way of saying it. 6:55, we're all leaving. I told Morella that I am pretty loud because I'm used to trying to talk over Jones, so we're going micless to start. If you can't hear, tell me, and I got the mic, but Jones will be super disappointed in me that I had to use something to amplify my voice. Really appreciate all y'all coming. Appreciate Flyleaf doing this. They, of course, always do an awesome job with stuff like this. I was just in here a couple weeks ago buying stuff for Christmas. I did it early. Someone tell my wife. So mostly I want to hear questions from y'all because that's always more fun than me just talking. Most of you hear me talk enough and probably don't want to endure that any more than you have to. But I did want to tell you a little bit about kind of how this book came about. Someone tweeted at me today and said that Joe Giglio was complaining that there was a book about this season. Well, I don't know if you know who Joe Giglio is, but if you do, you're probably not surprised. Joe Giglio is a big giant state fan who tries to pretend that he's not a big giant state fan who works for WRAL. And as we know, NC State has not even appeared in the Final Four since 1983, when some people in this room were not born. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if State goes to the Final Four, they will probably produce statues or something like that. They did have a parade for going to the Gator Bowl, if you remember. But I did just kind of want to explain how the book came about and why it came about. Carolina did not win the national championship, as I think we all know. But it was such a memorable year for so many other reasons. And I had done a book on Coach Williams' first year at Carolina, what now seems like a really long time ago. But that one he was not really involved in that other than he didn't discourage it. But it wasn't like I was just hanging out with him every day. But it was a pretty good experience, and it was a nice window into what was happening there and was really helpful when, in fact, the Tar Heels won it the next year. And then he was a little more familiar with the process and what was going on. So I had talked about it a little bit with Coach Davis, but it was just it was a sudden change and a complete regime change, and he wasn't really sure how he wanted to do things, and we weren't really sure what he would want to do. So at the start, we said, well, we're probably not doing this. And then, of course, as the season progressed, we thought, well, thank goodness we're not doing this. Because I can't imagine that chapter on the home loss to Pitt is really not going to have a lot of readers. But then somehow the Tar Heels just started playing really well. And we didn't really broach the subject again until the Baylor game. After that 3-hour experience that we all had there in Fort Worth. And we started thinking, well, I wonder if maybe this might be a good idea. But of course, Steve Kirshner, for those of you who know him, does a great job with athletic communications for basketball and just an encyclopedia of Tar Heel basketball, everything. He said, well, we've never done one when we haven't won a championship. I said, well, Steve, maybe we'll win. He's like, well, we're just going to the Sweet 16, which at that time was true. But then I started looking at the bracket, and I remember thinking, wait a minute, if this continues on, and they continue on, we're going to run into each other. And I really enjoyed that win at Cameron, but I thought I was done with them. And I probably enjoyed it a little too much to have to see them again. Because I do think I remember running down and high-fiving Eric Hoots as he ran off the court in front of a lot of Duke fans. So I kind of thought that was like my farewell to Mike Krzyzewski. And I was fine with that. And I feel like Mike Krzyzewski was fine with that too. But then I started thinking, well, if we play them again, and if the Tar Heels happen to win, now that is a book. Well, I don't know if y'all know, but we did play them again. And it was one of the most stressful days of my life, for sure. I still remember just sitting in my hotel room in New Orleans, and my family was there, and they went out and had fun, and I just sat in the room and looked out the window and thought about how stressed out I was. I remember Eric Montross and Jones Angel and I went over to the game like 3 hours early because we just couldn't sit around anymore. And we thought, well, if we're going to sit around, we'll sit around at the Superdome. And we had to sit through that first game, which absolutely no one cared about. And I'm not even sure the fans of the participating teams cared all that much. It didn't really seem like Villanova cared. And then the day had moved so slowly. But then once it finally got started, it was like it really happened fast. And then when we won the game, probably about the time the final buzzer hit, I start getting texts from some of the athletic administrators and stuff saying, all right, are we doing this book? Oh, now you think it's a good idea. So we had a meeting the next morning in the hotel there in New Orleans. Maybe not one of those 9 a.m. meetings. It might have been more like a 1 p.m. meeting. I think folks had had a full night the night before, and talked to Coach Davis about it, and he said he was good with it, no matter what the outcome on Monday night was, that he felt like it had been a significant enough season. And I think because of, and he wouldn't say this, but I will, just because of him, it was a significant season. And letting people get to know a little more about what he wanted to do with his program, and some of the things he did differently from the folks who came before him, and some of the things he did the same as the folks who came before him, I think were important to let people know, and also to let people really see more of his personality. I really think people have this image of him as this very nice guy, which he is, who just pats people on the back all the time, no matter what happens, and says, that's all right, buddy, go get him next time. And you just don't play in the NBA for 12 or 13 years with that kind of approach. You have to be really competitive. And he is. And so we wanted to be able to show that a little bit, and he was nice enough to give us some time and allow us to show that side of him. And the players were only too happy to talk about that because I think they also sometimes get people going, oh, gosh, Hubert Davis is the nicest guy. And meanwhile, they're thinking, I just ran like 8 22s. He's not that nice a guy. So it was fun to have them all sit down and tell stories about the season that maybe they hadn't told before. The part you may not know, and hopefully you can't tell, there's one person in here who knows, is that this book had to be done by May 1st. Wow. Completely done. Written, pictures, laid out from page 1 to page last. No, not like a fake May 1st deadline, which is what I thought it was when we first talked about it. Like, oh, in theory, May 1st would be great. And I thought, oh, yeah, okay, they mean June 1st. You know how that is. But they really meant May 1st due to supply chain issues, which is what the fault of everything is, as we know. So we got back from New Orleans on maybe like April 5th, April 6th, somewhere in there, and sat down with the players the very next week. It was kind of nice because it gave us a deadline, and I don't know if you've ever dealt with college basketball players, but if you tell them you need to talk to them next week, to them that means like July. So to be able to tell them, like, we need to talk to you real next week, that gave them a little more impetus to help us. One thing that was a part of this book that was not a part of any other book we've ever done is NIL. I was on the phone at halftime of the Kansas game, when things looked a little differently than they looked after the game, having a conversation about could we actually put players on the cover? And were we even going to be able to include pictures of players in the book without them agreeing to include that? We had never had that discussion before because there had never been NIL before. So that, in large part, is why Hubert Davis is on the cover and not like a team shot or something, because you don't have to worry about, for example, not saying he would do this, but just for example, Armando Bacot's agent coming back and saying, wait a second, Armando's picture's on the cover, go ahead and cut us a check. The players were all, this, remember, was in like month 8 of NIL, so no one really knew what the rules were, and honestly, no one still knows what the rules are. But just trying to err on the side of caution with all of that. As it turned out, they were all very accommodating. Nobody caused any problem. Nobody said like, hey, give me my cut. If they had, I just would have said, okay, you're in charge of writing pages 50 through 100. So it all worked out, but it was quite an educational process to deal with all those things that we had never dealt with before. And eventually we got it finished, and I think, as you all probably know, anytime you can write a book that deals with beating Mike Krzyzewski in his last game at Cameron Indoor Stadium, and then 1 month later beating him in his last game ever, it tends to turn out pretty well. You got to be a pretty bad writer to mess that one up. So we were happy with the way it turned out, and it was a ton of fun to do. Really enjoyed sitting down with all the starting five and Coach Davis and several other members of the coaching staff, and it's been great to kind of relive it as the book came back from the printer and think, oh yeah, all that stuff really happened. Not as fun to relive some of that stuff that happened maybe like last Thanksgiving when the Tar Heels weren't playing very well. I remember Coach Davis, when we sat down with him for the book, said, are we really going to talk about Mohegan Sun? Like, yeah, we are. I think he had tried to repress that. But it was a lot of fun to do. It was mostly a fun season to watch. More so now that you think back on it than it was when you were in the middle of it, because there were certainly some times where I think people thought, I'm not sure these guys know what they're doing. But man, that last month was incredible. And short of a championship, I just don't think there's ever been a season like that. And I think I'm pretty sure there's some Tar Heel fans who would trade a championship for that win in New Orleans because that one's never going to go away. Like, you can't hang a banner for it, but let's be honest. Anytime you see somebody in a Duke shirt, don't you think, you know what happened? It used to make me really mad because you could always guarantee that anytime we go anywhere to play a game against anybody, it doesn't matter. We're at Louisville, Tallahassee, wherever. Somebody's got to wear their Duke shirt. I don't know why. I don't understand what the mindset is that leads someone to do that, but it happens every time. And it always kind of made me mad because I thought, well, is it really that important to you? But last night there was a guy in a Duke shirt at the game, and I thought, it's good to see you. Really glad you're here. I'm glad you're seeing all the blue. I'm glad you saw the intro video that featured Ding Dong, Duke is done. I just hope you've enjoyed this entire experience. It's been great. So I think it's made me a healthier person mentally. And of course, I mean, all y'all are what made that season so fun. We had so much fun talking about it on the podcast and hearing everybody's stories of how they experienced the game and who they watched it with and who they were texting with during the game and all the different stuff. I think it made us feel a little more normal, which is good and sometimes hard to do. It was a community thing, and it was a Chapel Hill thing, and no matter where you were, I think everybody felt like they were somewhere in proximity to the Smith Center or Franklin Street or anything like that. Just brought you back home for that night. And then it sent him home as well, which was also nice. So appreciate all the contributions that all y'all made, whether you knew you were making them or not, you were. And it helped us tell the story. So I can go on and talk about the season. I can tell you some more about the season. I would really rather hear your question. Oh, I will tell you one other thing. So the Syracuse game in Chapel Hill. Well, let me tell you a little bit about how postgame works at home. So we play the game. Hopefully the Tar Heels win. Jones and I go back to the locker room, and usually a player comes in and talks to me for 3 or 4 minutes for the radio, and then we put it online. And then Coach Davis comes in. Coach Davis likes to have somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes, usually depending on who the officials were that night, to himself to kind of decompress. And I remember before game 1 when he said that, we thought, oh, this is like a figure of speech. Like, he is not actually going to take 10 minutes to just sit in a dark room and like get his mind right. That is actually what he does. And I think he really needs it because by the time he comes in there with us, he's still in game mode. And game mode Hubert Davis is very different than if Hubert Davis walked in here right now and y'all would all think, oh, he's the nicest person in the world. Game mode Hubert Davis is ready to beat you. And not physically, but competitively. And usually, for example, last night when he came in there, like just all business, Jones, Adam, let's do this. Okay. So you got to be ready. You got to have your box score. You got to be ready. And so after the Syracuse game, Carolina had won. It wasn't all that pretty, but the next game was at Duke. And so we knew that we were going to get game mode Hubert Davis. But not only did we get game mode Hubert Davis, we got post-game mode Hubert Davis, pre-game Carolina at Duke Hubert Davis, and this was on a Monday. The game was on Saturday. And he finished the interview with Jones and just started pacing around the film room. Coach Davis, you seem like you're on edge. He's like, I'm just so ready to play that game. Everybody thinks we're going over there for a party. We are not going over there for a party. Coach Davis, we don't think you're going over there for a party. You don't have to convince us. I just don't think people understand. People think we're just like we're playing the Harlem Globetrotters and we're the Washington Generals. We're not going over there to just be a participant. We're going over there to beat them. And Hubert Davis doesn't curse at all. So this was some extreme language from Hubert Davis. And he doesn't even say bang bang. And whatever else goes with that. So just how fired up he was about that is always what I'm going to associate with that game at Duke, because that whole week, I mean, y'all know, you lived through it, was all about Mike Krzyzewski. And how fantastic would it be? And it's in the book, but Wes Durham is the one who told us, that's not in the book, that he was at an ACC network production meeting, I think on Wednesday or Thursday of that week. They were talking about how they were going to cover the game. And they had all these plans, and they had a set over there, and we're going to do this, and we'll run this video about Coach K, and it'll be fantastic, and a 3-hour Coach K love fest. Who can imagine anything greater on the ACC network? And then Wes goes, what's the plan if Carolina wins? And they all just sat there. There was no plan of Carolina. No plan whatsoever. And as you saw that night, Duke had no plan whatsoever. They were going to do their post-game ceremony and present Coach K with a bench and get all his family out there and have his kids and his grandkids, and everybody was going to clap, and it was going to be great, and they were going to celebrate beating the Tar Heels. And then Carolina won, and they were all like, oh, no. It was absolutely glorious. And I just remember seeing Wes after the game and go, Wes, you knew there should be a contingency plan. He was like, I tried to tell him. But no one other than Wes had even given it any thought other than Hubert Davis and the players who got on that bench to go over, got on that bus to go over to Cameron Indoor Stadium. And man, it was fun. I hope a ton. Well, how about all the Duke fans who spent tens of thousands of dollars for tickets and then got to take a giant L in Coach K's last game? Oh my gosh. Money well spent for sure. I would like to just know the money spent on tickets for that, because, I mean, remember, they auctioned 2 or 4 for $100,000 at his charity thing? Great. Thank you, Blue Devil fans. That charity benefited, and so did I. I got more than $100,000 out of it, I can tell you that, because it gives me joy every single time. So just a great week, and it all started that Monday night with game mode plus Hubert Davis already being fired up, because even that early in the week, he could already tell he didn't feel like people were giving him enough credit. And then, not even really him, his team. And then going to New Orleans, there was a lot of talk at practice about, people think that was a fluke. And people think we snuck up on them, or that they were not focused. I think they talked some about, well, the ceremony took away from our focus, and we were thinking too much about Coach K and not enough about the game. It's like that year when J.J. Redick was too tired to play basketball. When you get to be 22, it's hard to play basketball. And he told the team one day at practice, if any of you guys think that was a fluke, go back to the locker room. We beat them because we're better than them. And we're going to beat them again because we're better than them. And he was right. And that one was pretty glorious too. So from that point forward, anytime Hubert Davis tells me something, I just assume it is the absolute gospel truth because he knows what he's talking about as far as what I've seen. So even after a 6-point win over Gardner-Webb, feel like going to get things figured out. So fun year. Really appreciate all y'all being on the ride with us. It was incredibly fun. I've never seen a season like it. I don't believe anyone in this room who tells me that in mid-January they thought this is what's going to happen the rest of this season, because y'all were all as stressed out as I was. I know it. But a nice reminder too that sometimes things turn out a little differently than what you think, and so I try to keep that in mind even when the Tar Heels are losing at home to Pitt. And Jason Capel's out there shouting at the Heels as they leave the court, which that did happen. Hubert Davis didn't like that either. They've since talked. Things are better now. I don't think Jason Capel will do that again. But just an incredible ride, and sure appreciate y'all being part of it, but then also buying the book to be part of it. But I would rather answer your questions because I'd rather know what you want to know than have y'all just hear me talk. So anything you want to know, just let me know.
For just, I guess, to tie into that, for your rapid reactions and then the article that follows, because I guess everybody in here, it's my ritual, so I'm sure it's a lot of other people's ritual. And then it's become like my family, my daughter here, my mom, like we've all gotten in the ritual. How do you plan your process and plan for that? Are some of the bullet points already written as the game's going on? Do you know kind of what storyline you want to go with in the article and then see how the game goes? Just talk to that a little bit.
It's two different things. So rapid reactions, some of those are written during the game. Sometimes, though, like the game at Cameron, somewhere in my computer there's a whole thing of 14 or 15 rapid reactions to that game. And I was just sitting there and I was thinking, no one cares about this. Here's all they care about, this one sentence. And so that's what I did. In a normal game that doesn't send Coach K out with a loss in his last home game, I write a couple at halftime, and then over the last 2 or 3 minutes of the game, I write the rest. It's easier at home than it is on the road. And then at Cameron, it's hard to do because they don't have working internet. So that's how I do those. The column, I almost never know until we talk to either Coach Davis or a player after. Okay. And then usually they say something that clicks or makes me think of something that happened in practice that week or something. Going to practice helps a lot because you kind of know what they've been talking about already and you know what the points of emphasis have been. And so you know if they did or didn't do that. It's like last night. They had talked about rebounding for 2 practices straight. And so to only out-rebound Gardner-Webb by 2, right? You knew they and specifically Coach Davis were not going to be pleased with that outcome. So it wasn't a surprise when both he and RJ came in there and were down. So that helps a lot. You have kind of an idea of what the theme has been the last few days and being around the guys. And so they don't usually come in there and stun you with what they say. But they put it in a way that they have a much better perspective than any of us. So I try to wait and hear what they have to say. Okay. I also think it's really annoying when people go to the post-game stuff and clearly are writing about something and ask the question in such a way that makes it obvious, I'm writing about this. Please say some sentences that I can use to support what I'm doing. I would rather just want to know what do they think, and I'll work around that because they know more than me.
Back to those 2 awesome Duke losses last year.
I remember those.
You must have lots of contacts at Duke and perspective for someone like in your role over there that you communicate with. Maybe you don't, but I want to hear more about how they felt after that, right?
Describe the 2.
And I don't know. I know some Duke folks, and but usually I just jaw at them now when they. So I don't actually listen to their point of view. So I'm just curious what you know.
I think if they had to be absolutely honest today, they would say that they know it was a little much and that the whole buildup had been a little much.
The whole year.
yeah, the whole season, the whole farewell tour. Like, I think they know that was very him. Just like, and that's fine.
But it's not about him.
To him, it is. Just like the way Coach Williams did it was very him. And so I think it would have been awesome to be able to cheer for Coach Williams one last time when he walked off the court. Would I have wanted to go through a whole season of this is the last this, the last that? Probably not. But you got to remember, when you walk in Cameron, they've won some national championships, but the biggest banner by far has got Mike Krzyzewski's name on it. By far. Twice the size of anything else in that building.
Do we have a special banner like that?
No.
I don't think that's us. I think that's them.
No. For the double.
Oh. They know it. They had to hang up a Final Four banner from last year, and a friend of ours sent us a picture of it. It just makes me so happy that they had to hang that up in Cameron, and every single time they look at it, they're going to think, oh. So I think they would probably admit it got to be too big, and it maybe got away from them a little bit. But I think they, for 30 years or more, they tried to do exactly what he wanted them to do and what they thought he wanted them to do. And you eventually reach a point with somebody like that where you don't even really ask them anymore. You just assume, like, oh, I feel like I know this person well enough to know this is what they would want. And I think they would probably have a contingency plan this time. I think they now know, like, they should have done what we did with the 100 years. It should have been a separate thing, a separate night honoring Mike Krzyzewski in September or July or whenever you want, but not related to a game, because the biggest problem with a game is you might lose. And then people are in a completely different mood. I mean, anytime we do anything at the Smith Center around a game, like a ceremony or something for Coach Williams, like naming the court for Coach Williams was not at a game, because you might lose and he'll be really mad and it won't be a good night. And you'll always remember when you look at that floor, that's the night we lost to Georgia Tech or whatever. It should have just been a separate night. And I think they know that now. Didn't know that at the time. I will tell you, I don't know that I have as many relationships with the folks at Duke as you might think. Surprisingly, they are not big fans. Did I almost get kicked out of Cameron Indoor Stadium at Coach K's last game? Yes, I did.
Talk about that.
I can't tell that story. I'm not telling it with the camera on. We can talk about it later. So they're all completely bought in on what they are. And they all believe they have to be that way all the time. And I'll be interested to see if that changes under John Shire, who honestly I think might kind of be a nice guy. But did somebody just say he's cute? Okay. So I'll be interested to see how that changes and how much of that is Duke and how much of that was Coach K. Because I think those two things might be different, but it's just been really hard to tell them apart for the last couple decades. So we'll see. The camera's on. Duke's social media guy had a little run-in at the Smith Center one year. But it all worked out. So, yes, you're trying to get me in trouble. I see that red light. Okay. What else?
I was just curious, obviously, with Roy retiring, I think a lot of Tar Heel fans were very nervous about the future and not knowing who we'd go with. But it seems like every time the next guy up is someone that just loves Carolina. And I'm curious if you have any additional insight in how kind of Hubert was the one to get picked. Because I remember when Hubert came on, it was kind of an unknown, but, you know, as a fan now, you wouldn't want anybody else because of how much he loves the university, just like Roy, just like Dean. You know, can you speak to that?
I think people forget that at the time Coach Davis was hired as an assistant, it was like completely out of left field. Like, he was mostly a TV guy. It was like hiring Jeff Saturday to coach the Colts.
Yeah.
But that turned out fine too. I don't know that Coach Williams knew that about Coach Davis at the time to the degree that he began to know it when they spent more time together. But the time I really remember thinking there's something going on with these two was the night that they named the floor for Coach Williams, and all the alums were back, and a couple other people spoke, and then Coach Williams spoke and Coach Davis spoke, and they couldn't look at each other because they knew that the other would cry and that they would cry, and like that was the first time I really thought they've got a deeper relationship than I think people realize, because I mean Coach Williams and his assistants were friends, but it was just different because he had accomplished so much and he needed them to perform specific roles. But that's the night I thought Coach Davis is in a different role. And I don't think Coach Davis would be a head coach anywhere else other than the University of North Carolina. I don't think he would want to. I don't think he would want to take the time away from his family to do it for anyone other than North Carolina. And I think Coach Williams felt that way also for the last 5 or 6 years. He obviously did it at Kansas also, but he didn't have to do it all those years at Carolina. He could have gone and played golf. I think when Coach Davis finishes at Carolina, whatever that is, it's not going to be to go coach somewhere else. It's going to be probably to sit in the stands at the Smith Center or wherever we're playing now and watch the Heels, because he and Leslie made the choice to live here when they could have lived anywhere. They played in a bunch of different NBA cities and had really good relationships all across the country. But Chapel Hill was the place where they wanted to be. Chapel Hill was the place where they wanted their kids to grow up. And that's really important to them. Coach Davis talks all the time. He met his wife here. He graduated from here. All the things that changed his life happened here. And this is where he wants to be. And he and Coach Williams have that in common. I think they see a little bit of a similar family background with each other. Coach Williams, of course, is so close to his mom. Coach Davis was so close to his mom, and she passed away before he came to Carolina. So I think they've got that in common, but just the way they feel about Carolina is different than anyone else we have on staff. Not to say they don't feel strongly about it, but like the way they really feel it is different. And to know Coach Williams is to know he would have never had anyone sit in that chair who he wasn't completely sure was doing it solely for North Carolina and not at all about that person. And that's why when you heard, you know, like over the last few years of Coach Williams, you would see the list of like, here's who could be the next coach at Carolina. And you would see, I mean, this isn't to say anything bad about any of these people, but like Jay Wright. Jay Wright is a great coach, one of the greatest coaches of this era. But he's a coach. He's not a Carolina coach. And I think that was always something different to Coach Williams. He wanted Carolina. And that was always going to be the case. And I do think he saw something in Hubert Davis that a lot of people didn't. Because, and Coach Davis is a much different coach than Coach Williams, which I think is kind of weird. Like, I think Coach Williams and Coach Smith are pretty similar. Coach Davis and Coach Williams are not all that similar in the way that they coach. And that's out of character for Coach Williams because he liked things the way he liked them. And Coach Davis does them differently than that. But for him to recognize, despite that, this is still the guy, I think that says something about Coach Williams kind of as a leader.
Can you expand on just the differences in coaching style? I mean, what are you seeing as the primary differences?
Well, I mean, we started out last year running secondary break every time down the court because that's what Carolina had always done. Mm-hmm. And then dead middle of the season, Coach Davis, a couple guys get hurt, limited personnel, run a couple different things, and Coach Davis is like, you know what, I like that better. Coach Williams would not have done that. We were going to run secondary break. It didn't matter if we only had 3 guys on the court. They're going to run the secondary break. And he was going to do it the exact way he did it. And I think that's one thing about this season that's going to be so interesting. Like, we only have 1 year of head coach Hubert Davis to work off of. So I think a lot of people have assumed, well, the way he played last year, that's the way he's going to play all the games, all his years. I'm not sure that's true. I think he's going to be much more adaptable to what is the personnel, what do they do the best. And I think that's some of what you've seen in the first 3 games is we're still doing some things that we did last year, but we've got this year's personnel. I think eventually he'll decide there's some things that maybe don't work as well with this group, put in some new stuff. I mean, we were still putting in new stuff in February last year, that didn't happen in the Roy Williams era. Like, if you didn't know it by November, we probably weren't doing it. Because it worked. He went to the Hall of Fame. He won 3 national championships at Carolina. Coach Davis has got much more of an NBA mindset where, let me ask you, and he'll say this to Mondo sometimes, like the other night when Mondo had 1 point in the first half against Charleston. And then Coach Davis knew he wanted to come out and get the ball to Mondo first play of the second half. So he asked Mondo, what do you want? Like, what play do you want? What do you feel best about? What do you think is going to work against these guys? That's what we're going to do. That's a pretty player-centric approach, and much more of an NBA thing. And the other thing about Coach Davis that I think people forget, all that time at ESPN, he went to a lot of other practices and saw the way a lot of other coaches did it. And it was funny. I think this is in the book. I can't remember if we put it in or took it out, but because it was a little borderline. One thing he said he got from Duke was they just do stuff over and over. If you can't stop it, they're going to keep doing it until you stop it. And ironically, that is what we did to Duke last year. We found something they couldn't stop and just kept doing it. There's no need to be super creative when you have something that works. Like, you're not trying to get a bunch of style points. You're just trying to get actual points. So I think that is some of what makes him different. He's taken a little bit from several different guys. The vast majority is Dean Smith, but he's sprinkled in all these other things and some of the NBA coaches that he played for and against. I think that's a big part of what makes him who he is and what makes him just a little bit different.
You make me think, you mentioned Jeff Saturday. I'm also thinking Mac Brown. We have a little bit of a pattern emerging of media guys going back to become head coaches. What do you think that's about?
I think it's great because there's a chance I could be the head coach. I mean, Jeff Saturday was doing pregame on the Tar Heel Sports Network 2 weeks ago. Now he's the head coach of the Colts. I'm doing pregame on Tar Heel Sports Network right now. If the Lakers call, guys, I can't promise I'm going to be around. Well, I think the way the head coach position has evolved, especially in college, you need that guy who can manage the program. I mean, y'all have probably all heard me say this, but I think Mac Brown is perfect because he understands the program management part, and he also understands that you need some real nuts and bolts football guys on your staff to be coordinators and assistant coaches, and let him go out and do some of the other stuff. He knows football. But I think even he would probably tell you, like, if he gets on the grease board with Gene Chizik's probably going to out X and O him. But it doesn't matter because that's more the job description of an NFL head coach, I think. Like, and Jones and I have said before, I think off the air, like, I think Jeff Saturday would be a great head coach here because he's got that same Mac Brown personality. I've never met anyone who doesn't like Jeff Saturday. And that's why I'll be interested to see how it works out with the Colts. I mean, I want it to work out, but I'd like him to get a little taste and then think, I'd like to do this in Chapel Hill. Because I think he'd be really good. He knows enough football, but he also knows people. And I could see him being the athletic director at Carolina. Because we're just headed that way. Like, the athletic director used to be somebody who had worked their way up through all the I worked in the ticket office. Well, now, forget that. Like, you need somebody who sees a much bigger picture and understands things like NIL that are right, that are changing on a daily basis. So it's a very different job than it used to be. But I think having that media forward focus is so helpful because that's how people form their perception of your program. Now, you still have to be able to coach. But it's a nice starting point to have to get in the door.
Adam, I know you've been going to Carolina basketball for a lot of years, and there's not too many people that love it maybe as much as you do. Take us through like a typical home game day experience for you. What's your day like? I've got an impression that maybe you wake up at 5 a.m., eat breakfast, and head to the Smith Center.
Sometimes it's like that. Next week in Portland it'll be like that because the game's at 10 a.m. local time. We were talking about that last night. That's going to be an early one. The fun thing about my job is that there really is no typical day. The games that start at 8 or 9, that's like a whole different day than the rest of the day. And y'all probably feel that way too because you got to watch it just like I do. If the game starts at 9 on a Monday, to me, like you have your real Monday, then you have the game night Monday. So a lot of times we're doing interviews and stuff during the day. Somebody's coming in to do something for the pod. I'm talking to somebody for a story on the phone or something. I had to talk to Caleb's dad recently, and that was on a game day. So usually you're doing other stuff, not game related. And then I try to be there 2-ish plus or minus hours before the game to really be like at the game. And then there's just always stuff that comes up. There's people like former players who were there who you want to talk to and like set something up for the future or just see how they're doing. And then the really fun ones are when after the game, I think sometimes that's the part people don't get. Like it is nice to be able to go to the game and then just go home and be done with it. But there's other stuff to do. There's the post-game interviews. Jones and I do a video show at home games. Then there's write the story, transcribe the interviews, do all that stuff. Again, and I'm not saying this is bad because I'd rather do that than have a real job. But there's a lot after. Jones and I always say like a lot of his stuff comes before because he has to know about the other team. I don't care about the other team. I just as soon not know about the other team. But then when it's over, he's mostly done, and I'm kind of starting, so it evens out eventually. That's why sometimes those late night podcasts get a little loose because, like, I know that there's still like 3 hours after this podcast. So, and also I just want to throw a couple things in there that he has to go back and edit. Just to see if he's paying attention. But it's a lot of fun. And like I said, what I like about it is that there's never a typical anything, which always makes it interesting. And you always see something different every single time. And the great thing about doing that at Carolina games, there's always somebody who's there for the first time. And you can always tell who they are. And it's so fun to get to see them because that reminds you that, like, it's supposed to be fun. Like, even when we're losing to Gardner-Webb, like, this is still a really big deal for a lot of these people who have never done this before. And it may or may not be my millionth one, but to somebody, like, this might be the only time they get to do it. And to be able to be part of that is awesome.
You just brought up the pod. Interesting to see your opinion on how that's really taken off and how much of you and Jones's time that takes up these days and what's that all about.
It's incredible that people listen to us talk to each other. I'm still amazed by that. I think it all really comes from the baseball broadcasts that we did from 2005 till around 2013. And baseball on the radio is a lot different than basketball or football on the radio because there's so much downtime. So we would just sort of entertain each other because, like, it's kind of like the typical day. Like, you think about those big games in Omaha or whatever, like, those are actual baseball broadcasts. You don't think about, like, the Tuesday game against UNC Asheville and there's 14 pitching changes and the game takes 4 hours and Carolina wins 12-1. A lot of downtime in those games. So we would just find things to talk about. And we got to where we would take emails from people. And then I think at some point they invented Twitter, so then we could take tweets. Like, we started the Diamond Heels account because we needed to be able to communicate with listeners. And so we thought, well, people like this. And honestly, I did not know what a podcast was. And I had kind of heard of it, and I said to Jones one time, like, should we do a podcast? And he was like, I don't know what that is. And I said, I don't either, but I think people talk to each other, maybe. And within a few months of that, Learfield came to him and was trying to get one started at each of their schools. And so he said, well, we've kind of talked about this. We could do it for this, I guess. And that's what happened. And we had absolutely no idea that it was going to turn into what it is. Like, I think at most of the Learfield schools, it's like a once-a-month podcast. Maybe we should have started with that. And the thing about Jones is, like, he is a perfectionist. And so he wants it to be really good. And sometimes when I listen to other podcasts, because now I do listen to other ones since I know what it is now, they just don't sound as good. And I think that's a big part of it. Like, he makes it sound really good and really professional. And even when I know we were in there just messing around, like, it comes out really good. He throws all that other stuff in there. So to me, that's a huge part of it. And then the other part of it is just how many people have been willing to talk to us. I'm still surprised that some of these people talk to us. Like, maybe they think we're someone else. I always throw in there when I try to get someone to talk to us. So Jones does what Woody Durham used to do to make sure that they understand, like, we're almost as important as Woody Durham. Usually that helps them understand a little better. But it's just been so much fun. And I think also it's therapy for us. I mean, that all those conversations you hear are conversations we would be having anyway. And so we just turn the mic on and record it. That's why sometimes we have to take some things out. But the listeners are the ones who have made it, because they've gotten invested in some of the silly stuff we do, and Big Grits and Steve and all the things that we've done. That they've liked, and they come say hello at games, and we're still surprised. And we've met people from all over. And I think that's another thing about it is, like, you can touch people all over the world. And I think it's helped us realize, like, the people in this room, we're all fortunate because we're right here. There's a lot of people really far away who are getting up at crazy hours of the night to listen to games and watch games and text their friends. And it's been a way to connect all them and make them feel a little closer to home. And so I think that's been a big part of it too. Like, they feel like they're here with us, kind of. And that's been really nice because we've gotten to meet some of those folks. I mean, we've met some people who've come over from England, and like just to come say hello. And that kind of blows my mind, honestly, because we're just having fun talking in a little tiny room. Like, we used to be in the officials' locker room next to a urinal. And they thought we were in some fancy studio. Now we are, but for the majority of the time, we did most of those interviews next to a urinal. Because I think they really wanted to give us a full sense of how important we were. And we fully grasped it. But it's been great. I mean, I can't say enough about how much we appreciate all the people who have listened and have made it a part of something they listen to at least semi-regularly, and a lot of people every single time.
So 2 things. First of all, don't get rid of the Friday song.
Oh yeah, big battle this week.
Every Friday, so please keep that.
Okay.
Agree.
Your vote has been counted.
You alluded to next football coach at Carolina. Do you have any indication as to how long Max Brown thinks he's going to continue to be coach?
No, but I think he really enjoys it.
That's clear.
Yeah. I mean, and I think he's where he wants to be. Like, I don't think he wants to retire to Chapel Hill, which is where he would retire to. And so that gives him a reason to keep doing it. I think Sally, for the most part, enjoys him doing it. Like, it's hard being a coach's wife. But I think she likes where they are. I think he really still likes the kids, which is, I think, and he still connects with the kids somehow, which I don't understand. I hope I do when I'm Mac Brown's age. But he really does it in a good way. Like, we talked to Cameron Kelly today for Friday's pod. He was awesome, by the way. And he was like, I was talking to Mac about this. I was talking to Mac about that. Like, he really sees him as a peer, which I don't know how Mac is able to pull that off. So the short answer is I don't see like a window on it right now because I think he's having too much fun. He likes his staff, and he's getting great results right now. Morella just gave us the warning signs. Better get your questions in now because she's about to lock the doors and we're all going to spend the night here.
How do you think kind of the transfer portal impacts like team chemistry versus like bringing in new freshmen?
It's really tough. And we've been fortunate at Carolina because we haven't even used it as much as some other places have. I mean, there's other places turning over their entire roster. I wasn't going to say that. Coach Davis, I think, has been really selective about, and Coach Brown too, honestly, about making sure they're the right kind of cultural fit in addition to, like, can they play the position that the Tar Heels need them to play? But you're not going to hit on every one, because even Coach Davis, who's been careful, has gotten maybe an example or two that weren't exactly what he thought. And part of that is because the process is so sped up. I mean, Brady Manick had never even heard of Hubert Davis on Monday, and on Friday he was moving halfway across the country. And you're used to spending years recruiting somebody, and you talk to their guidance counselors and their teachers and their family members and all these people, and you might just talk to Brady Manick and his dad. Well, of course his dad thinks Brady Manick's awesome. And he's going to tell him it'll be a great fit. Yeah, it'll work out perfect. It just isn't going to be that way every single time. So that part is tricky, and I think it would be foolish to assume every single transfer is going to work out because of that, because someone's going to get here and it's not what they expected, and it's not really either side's fault. It's just because you had to decide so quickly. The other thing about it that has really been striking is there is a giant difference between a college graduate and an 18-year-old. Like Pete Nance and Jalen Washington are basically from separate planets in terms of just their maturity. And I like them both a ton. Like, they're both awesome. I would go eat dinner with both of them, but I would have a very different experience at those two dinners. So you're bringing in someone, if you're bringing in like a grad transfer, who's just more mature, and what they want to get out of the experience is a lot different. Like, Pete Nance has been through college. He's here to win. Somebody compared it, I think they sent it into the pod, like, he's like an NBA guy who signed somewhere to get a ring. That's pretty much right. Whereas, like, the Seth Trimbulls of the world are like, oh, I'm going to be here for years, and the sky's so blue, and this is so great. But honestly, it's kind of nice talking to Pete Nance. Like, he is an adult. So it's really tricky to get the right mix, because I think, like, a lot of the guys think Pete Nance is like 40. Because he's just so much more mature than them, and the things he says, they're like, what? Yeah. So you can't have too much of that, but a little bit of that is really good. And you can't have too much of the 18-year-old, like, woo, I like puppies. But you need a little bit of that to remind everybody that it is college basketball and it's supposed to be fun. So I think it's made being a coach a lot more difficult. And I mean, there's the whole other side that we haven't even really talked about, which is if you make somebody mad, they might leave tomorrow. And it used to be like they would have to stick it out, and then they'd go home for the summer and they'd think about it. Well, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Somebody on this team right now might be gone at Christmas, because that's just how it is now. And you've got other schools calling them constantly. And anybody who says they're not is lying. And maybe they're not calling them directly, but maybe they know somebody who knows their dad, and they know their dad is unhappy with their minutes, or their AAU coach is telling them they should be getting more shots. Oh, well, if you just went to fill in the blank, you'd start and play 40 minutes. Well, if you hear that enough, you start thinking, that sounds pretty good. But the thing about Carolina that has always been true with basketball is it's really hard to get somebody to leave Carolina basketball, because almost anywhere you go is a step down. And it's like someone like Kerwin Walton. Like, he went to Texas Tech in Lubbock. And you got to really want to shoot a lot to move from Chapel Hill to Lubbock. So I think Carolina will probably have less movement than some other places, just because it's hard for a lot of guys to get their mind around, like, I am going to step down. And sometimes that's hard to do. Let's do like one more before Morella deadbolts the door. Okay.
Was I the only person right up until Duke tipped this year that was a little afraid he was still going to be sitting there instead of John Steyer?
It was incredible the number of people who wanted to know if he might, like, come back and do one more. I think I think he may not have been physically capable of doing one more year. I mean, he looked old by the end of last year. And this is going to happen to all of us. I felt old by the end of last year too. But it's just a grind. And I'm not sure even he who wanted people to love him so much could have managed to do it for another year. But I was surprised. I guess Duke had played before last night, but I don't really know. I think they beat random teams. And we were walking out of the locker room, and they had the Duke-Kansas game on, and John Shire was over there. And I thought, oh, he actually is the coach now. Okay, well, just confirming that is the case. So that I was a little surprised, honestly. Go ahead, Shay.
Oh, I was just gonna tag it on to the transfer portal, the NIL, as far as with all the sports. So it's not just like if you're not getting your minutes, but if, say, an SEC team who, like y'all have said, they've always done that. They're just now doing it legally.
Right.
As far as being able to woo them with money and whether it's money or what you spoke to, the noise that these kids. I mean, I was honestly taking to heart your article this morning because I'm thinking about my own children and the noise that they are having to deal with being teenagers and now a young adult and dealing with school. I can't fathom what these athletes are going through between, oh, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to work my NIL deal and I'm going to go to basketball and these people are wooing me and people are talking hate on social media. I don't, like, does Hubert say just turn it all off? Well, like, I'm not even strong enough to do that with my own children.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely says that, and they definitely don't do it. And I think it's hard for me to fully understand, like, when Caleb Love gets all emotional about, like, people are saying mean things to me on Instagram, like, I naturally think, well, they're just stupid idiots on Instagram. But, like, to him, like, that is really meaningful. Like, it would have been like someone calling my house to tell me when I was his age, I think you suck at basketball or whatever. And it's really personal to him. Like, it's not just some random person that he wouldn't actually put any value in their opinion otherwise. That is how he communicates. And so I think that's one thing Hubert Davis is really good at, is understanding, as silly as it might seem to him, it's not silly to 18 to 22-year-olds because that is their life. And I think he's been good about, you guys need to kind of keep a little perspective on this, but I understand that really you don't have perspective on this. The NIL stuff is nuts. Somebody's going to offer Drake May millions of dollars to go there this summer. There's absolutely no doubt that offer is happening. Unfortunately for them, he's a May. If he was Drake Smith, that would be a battle. But it's just part of college sports now, and it's a complete it is 180 degrees from what college sports was 18 months ago. And nobody told us it was going to happen. We just like woke up on June 1st or July 1st or whatever it was, and they're like, all right, remember all those rules we told you to follow? Those aren't the rules anymore. The rules now are completely different. And people are still trying to figure it out.
The door is being locked.
Okay. Marilla's got the deadbolt. Everybody move as quickly as possible. Thank y'all for coming. I really appreciate it.
It's cool. We can take the conversation outside now.
That's right. We have to go stand in the parking lot.
She didn't say take conversations outside.